Shamai chuig, wusimwi, anyanapchugig Luis. Greetings, my name is Luis.
Kamdot muvak nya Kelly Mulik. Greetings, my name is Kelly, and welcome to our Autumn Pipash Living Languages series, New Words.
In last week's episode, Kelly, you talked about one way that Pipash creates nouns from verbs using the prefix nim, and how this is one way that new words are created in Pipash. Autumn has a very similar way of creating nouns from verbs that is also a source of new words in the language.
That's great. Tell us all about it.
Just like in Pipash, there are a number of ways to turn a verb into a noun in Autumn. Most of the time, this is done by adding a suffix to the end of the verb. Autumn actually has a number of suffixes that, when added to a verb, create a new type of noun. For example, there is a suffix dam that is used to specify the person who does the action implied by the verb. An example of this is chikpandam, which means worker, and comes from the verb chikpan, which is a verb that means to work. There is another suffix dag that creates an abstract noun that can refer to a concept or idea related to the verb. An example of this is the word kiidak, which means home or standard of living. This word is based on the verb ki, which in Autumn means to live somewhere.
Interesting. Are there any other ways to create nouns from verbs in Autumn?
Yes, and there is even one that is almost a perfect parallel to Pipash Nyem. This is the Autumn suffix kut, which is used to create words that are a tool, gadget, or instrument that is related to the verb.
That does sound similar to the Pipash prefix nim.
One example that we talked about in our previous episode was the Pipash word for toy, nyamaraoik. In Autumn, we create the word for toy using almost the same process, except we add the suffix kut to the end of the verb. In this example, the verb chichvi, which means to play in Autumn, becomes chichvikut, which means toy or something you play with.
That seems pretty straightforward. Is it always that simple?
Most verbs in Autumn end in a consonant, so we usually add a vowel before adding the suffix kut. So take the verb nyuid, which means to see. In order to create a noun that means something that you use to see with, like a mirror, you add an a vowel to the end of nyuid before adding the kut suffix to form the word nyuidakut.
That doesn't seem too difficult. Can I try to create a word?
All right, try using this one. In Autumn, the verb that means to sweep something is voson. Just from that information, how do you think you would say the word broom?
Based on what you told me, since voson ends in a consonant, I would first add the a vowel before adding kut. So I would guess the word for broom is vosonokut.
Right. Now how would you say the word scissors in Autumn? The word for cutting things like hair or grass is hik.
So that would be hikakut, right?
Right. See? Making nouns from verbs can be pretty fun and easy. What's interesting is in Autumn, the new word can often refer to a variety of objects. This is okay as long as the object is a tool or gadget that is used to do the action referred to by the verb. For example, take the word quinta, which means to count in Autumn. In Autumn, you can turn this into an instrument by adding kut to form the word quintakut.
What does quintakut refer to then?
Quintakut can refer to a variety of things that you use to count or measure. For example, a ruler would be called a quintakut because you use it to count length or objects. Can you think of any other things that could be called a quintakut?
So I imagine that could possibly be a calculator, right?
Right. A calculator or anything that is used to count would be a quintakut in Autumn. Another example is the word quikut in Autumn, which means a flute. Quikut can also mean a radio or even an iPod or anything that has music in it.
That's interesting. I can see with the example that quikut originally referred to a traditional flute made out of river reed, and the meaning of the word expanded to include new musical items like radio or iPod.
Exactly.
So I imagine that the verb quikut comes from the word qui. Wait, isn't that the word for mesquite tree in Autumn? I'm a little confused. What's the verb it's based on and what does it mean?
Well, quikut actually comes from the Autumn verb kuh, which means to play an instrument, especially one like a woodwind. This verb is a bit irregular and changes from ku, to kui when you use it to form a noun. There are other verbs that do something similar. Take, for example, the O'atham word for chair, daikut. This word comes from the verb dah, which means to be sitting at a place. In these examples, the verb shortens and the vowel e is added to the end of the word. Another example of this is the O'atham word vo'o, to lay down, which is used to make the noun voikut, which is what we call a bed. Here we see a similar pattern where the verb again is shortened and an e vowel is added to the end prior to adding kut.
So how can a learner know when to add an ah vowel or when to use the other pattern when they shorten the verb and add an e?
Learners basically have to memorize those exceptions to the regular pattern. Thankfully, there aren't that many, and most words will just add an ah vowel before adding the suffix kut.
Are there any other type of exceptions or things to be aware of with regards to the kut suffix?
As we saw with the example nyoidakut and quintakut, sometimes the word can represent a variety of objects. When speakers want to be a bit more specific, they will add other words to form a compound noun. For example, if you wanted to describe a pair of binoculars or telescope in O'atham, one way to say it is by adding the word muk, which means far away, and haichu, which means something, to make the O'atham word muk haichu nyoidakut. Also, there are a couple of examples where kut is used when you want to describe a place and not a tool or gadget that is associated with the verb. For example, to say the word school in O'atham, we use the word mashchamakut, which is formed based off of mashcham, to teach someone something. Another example is the word noraftakut, which means store in O'atham. This word is based off the word meaning to buy something, which is noraft in O'atham. Some speakers use the word vumnyokut to refer to cell phones. This is based on the word vum, with, and the word nyokut, which is an instrument you use to talk with. One speaker explained to me that it's the phone that you take along with you.
So that's interesting that both languages use a similar way to create new words for tools, gadgets, and instruments. The only difference is in the way you change the verb and if you place a new part at the beginning, like with pipash nyim, or at the end of the word, like O'atham kut.
And like you said in a previous episode, Kelly, making new words using pipash nyim or O'atham kut is something that speakers have always done and is a way for us to create new words in the future. We just need to keep applying this to new items that we come across in the present.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Living Languages, New Words, and tune in for more episodes to learn how our languages have grown and adapted over time. Niyudncha.
Nova upam